In the movie The Truman Show, the creator of Truman's artificial world is asked why Truman has never discovered the true nature of his reality. His answer was chilling. We accept the reality of the world with which we are presented. It's as simple as that. How many times have you done that this week? Accepted a version of yourself that is incredibly convenient for everyone else, but leaves you feeling like a ghost in your own life. You aren't being agreeable. You're living in a masterpiece that requires constant escape because it was never built to nourish you. Today, the performance ends.
Welcome to Passion Struck. Hi, I'm your host, John R. Miles, and on the show, we decipher the secrets, tips, and guidance of the world's most inspiring people and turn their wisdom into practical advice for you and those around you. Our mission is to help you unlock the power of intentionality so that you can become the best version of yourself. If you're new to the show, I offer advice and answer listener questions on Fridays. We have long-form interviews the rest of the week with guests ranging from astronauts to authors, CEOs, creators, innovators, scientists, military leaders, visionaries, and athletes. Now, let's go out there and become Passion Struck.
Most people, when they think of The Truman Show, remember the ending. They remember the boat hitting the wall, the painted sky, and the moment Truman finally walks through that door into the unknown. That's the escape. That's the part we cheer for. But the moment that actually changes everything happens much earlier. It's quieter. It's almost easy to miss. A spotlight falls from the clear blue sky. It lands on the street right in front of Truman's car. He gets out. He looks up, and the sky looks perfectly normal. He looks at the people around him, and every single one of them acts like nothing has happened. So he does too. That is the moment, not the escape. The first time he noticed something was wrong and talked himself out of it. Because that's the thing about the performance. It doesn't require guards or walls. All it needs is for the people around you to act normal and for you to trust their version of reality more than you trust your own. I know what it feels like, not from a movie. Several years ago, I lost one of my closest friends to suicide. I want to be careful how I say this, because the grief of that is its own thing. It never fully leaves. But what I wasn't prepared for was what that loss did to the way I saw my own life. When you lose someone that close, someone who just a few days earlier was standing right next to you in the world, you stop being able to pretend. The normal distractions stop working. The routine that felt purposeful the week before suddenly feels like furniture you've been rearranging in a house you don't actually live in. I started asking questions I'd been very successfully avoiding. How much of this, the way I show up, the role I play, the version of myself I present every single day, how much of this was actually chosen? And how much of it just accumulated? Because it was easier, because it kept the peace, because somewhere along the way, I learned that being needed was safer than being known. That was my spotlight moment. It didn't fall from the sky. It came from losing someone I loved and realizing that I had been so busy being useful, so busy being the person everyone else needed me to be, that I became a stranger to myself. And that's what I mean when I talk about being invisible. And it doesn't happen dramatically. It happens gradually. The way a room gets dark when the sun goes down, and you don't notice until you realize you can't see. In our conversation earlier this week, Nick Epley put language to something I felt in my bones during that time. He shared that we are wired, genuinely neurologically wired, for real connection. Not convenient connection, not managed connection, real. But we consistently choose the version that requires less exposure, less friction. We choose the version that carries less risk of being seen and found wanting. We do that because being truly known feels dangerous and being useful feels safe. But here is what nobody tells you about safe. Safe is exhausting. You can never fully rest inside a performance. Some part of you is always watching, always adjusting, always making sure that the mask is straight so the audience stays happy. The real cost of that isn't burnout, it isn't even stress. The cost is distance. It's the distance between you and the people you love, the distance from the work that could actually matter, and eventually the distance from yourself. Truman didn't escape because he was brave. He escaped because the cost of staying finally became higher than the cost of finding out the truth. That is the shift I'm talking about today. The quiet internal moment where you stop trusting the performance more than you trust yourself. That shift is available to you right now. Not at the end of this episode, but right now. That spotlight already fell. You already looked up. The only question is whether you're going to talk yourself out of it again. I know that's a heavy place to start, but if you're listening to this and that spotlight moment feels uncomfortably familiar, I want you to know you aren't navigating this alone. This entire Purpose by Design series is about bridging the distance between the person you're performing and the person you're becoming. If you want to dive deeper into these ideas, I want to invite you to join me over at my Substack, The Ignited Life. It's where I share clear, honest essays on purpose, resilience, and mattering in a chaotic world. It's the raw, written companion to the conversations we have here. You can find all of that at theignitedlife.net. Now, let's look at the cost of staying in character. Because once you see that spotlight, you start to see the fine print in the contract. You start to notice the terms of the contract you've been signing every single day. A lot of what we call belonging is actually just a performance contract. We think we're part of a community, a family, or a team because of who we are. But often we are only there because of how we behave, and more importantly, how we make everyone else feel. We don't always see the terms of the contract until we try to change them. Think about Truman Capote. If you're not familiar with him, Capote was the toast of New York high society in the 1950s and 60s. He was the author of Breakfast at Tiffany's, but he was even more famous as a social fixture. He surrounded himself with a group of the wealthiest, most powerful women in the world, women like Babe Paley and Gloria Guinness, whom he famously called his swans. For 20 years, Capote was the ultimate agreeable slave. He was the gold standard of social utility. He was the witty entertainer, the perfect dinner guest who knew all the secrets and made the elite feel interesting and seen. In exchange, he was given the keys to the kingdom, yachts, estates, and absolute belonging. He played the role perfectly. But in 1975, Capote had his own spotlight moment. He decided to stop being a mirror and start being a writer again. He published a story called La Côte Basque, which took the private, ugly truths of those polished rooms and put them on the page. He stopped being convenient. The reaction was instantaneous. Every one of his friends cut him off. He wasn't just uninvited, he was erased. He spent the rest of his life publicly destroyed, but arguably, for the first time, he was free. Most people look at that story as betrayal, but the Stoics would look at it as a receipt. The swans didn't leave because Capote betrayed them. They left because he stopped being useful to them. The moment he stopped reflecting back the image that they wanted to see, the transaction was over. Capote's exile wasn't a punishment. It was proof of what the relationship had always been worth. It was a performance contract that he had finally refused to renew. And this happens at every scale. It's the friend group that suddenly feels off when you stop being the funny one or the one who always pays. It's the family dynamic that fractures the moment you say, actually, I don't agree, or no, I can't do that this year. If your people leave when you stop performing, they didn't leave you, they left the show. And the show was killing you anyway. That brings us back to a harder question, and it's one that ties directly back to what Nick Epley and I discussed earlier in the week. Nick's research highlights that we often stay in these convenient social lanes because we're terrified of the friction that comes with being real. We assume that if we show the unperformed version of ourselves, people will run. But the real question isn't whether the people in your life would stay if you changed. It's whether you've actually given them the chance to meet the unperformed version of you, or whether you've been protecting yourself from their answer. When you stay in the role of the fixer or the people pleaser, you aren't being kind, you're being dishonest. You are depriving the people you love of the opportunity to actually know you. You are trading the safety of being needed for the risk of being loved. And that is the ultimate transaction. You are trading your aliveness for a sense of security that can be taken away the second you stop being useful. As Deepika Chopra reminded us, real optimism isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's about the grit to stay curious about what's real. And what's real is that any mattering that requires you to shrink is just a well-furnished prison. If you want to design a life you don't need to escape from, you have to stop paying for approval with the currency of your own soul. You have to be willing to hold up that receipt and admit that the price has become too high, because the only approval worth having is the one you don't have to perform for. Everything else is just a job. You haven't quit yet. After I lost my friend, I did what a lot of people do after a loss like that. I changed things. I restructured. I got very busy redesigning the surface of my life. I did what I'd spent years writing about in Passion Struck. New priorities, new commitments, a cleaner calendar. About 6 months in, I noticed something uncomfortable. The hollow feeling I thought I'd left behind, it had followed me because I had changed the set. I hadn't changed the script. That's the mistake almost everyone makes at the moment of recognition. They treat the spotlight as a starting pistol for action. They quit the job, they end the relationship, they move to the new city, and they bring the same unexamined performance with them into the new room. The real work isn't the exit, it's what you build after it. Most people get this wrong because they start with the wrong question. They ask, what should I change? When the question that actually matters is, what am I building this for? The first shift is from audience to authorship. Stop asking yourself how this looks and start asking how it feels from the inside when nobody is watching, because those are two entirely different questions that produce two entirely different lives. When you design for the audience, you optimize the surface. When you design for authorship, you build the foundation. You stop caring about the profile and start caring about the presence. The second shift is from belonging to resonance. Belonging in its cheapest form asks you to fit the room, to shrink, to perform, to be convenient. Resonance is different. Resonance asks you to be real and let that truth select who stays. It doesn't ask you to fit. It asks you to vibrate at your own frequency and see who responds. One requires you to shrink. The other allows you to expand. And that's what Nick Epley's research is actually pointing at. Not just that connection matters, but that the counterfeit version of it is costing you the real thing. The third shift is the one nobody talks about because it sounds too quiet to be meaningful. It's the shift from escape to return. The goal here isn't a perfect life. It isn't an enviable one. It's a good life you are genuinely glad to return to after the hard days. Not because it's easy, not because you've optimized away all the difficulty, but because it's yours. Think back to the end of the Truman Show. Truman reaches the edge of his world. The boat hits the wall. The director's voice comes over the speaker. Warm, paternal, persuasive, telling him to stay. He tells Truman the real world is dangerous, that people are cruel, that Truman is safer inside the lie. Truman thinks about it. You can see him weigh the safety of the performance against the terror of the truth. And then he takes a bow. It's small. It's private. It's almost funny. And then he walks through the door into the dark. The bow is everything. It's not rage. It's not a manifesto. It's just a man acknowledging the performance, thanking the audience for their time, and leaving. You are allowed to do that too. You are allowed to thank the version of you that got this far the one who was useful, the one who was reliable, the one who kept the peace, and then quietly walk through the door into the person you actually are. The spotlight already fell. The receipt has been counted. The only thing left is the design. And this time, you get to be the architect. Before I let you go, I want to give you one thing to carry out this episode. Not a framework, not a checklist, just one question. If nobody was watching, no opinions, no consequences, no one to explain yourself to, what would you do differently tomorrow? Whatever came up first, the immediate flash of a different choice, that's the unperformed version of you trying to get your attention. Don't talk yourself out of it this time. Just notice it. Notice the moments this week when the weights lift, when a conversation ends and you feel more like yourself than when it started, when you're doing something and you forget to wonder how it looks to the audience. Those moments are the blueprint, not the vision board, not the 5-year plan. They are the moments when the performance stops and something quieter and truer takes its place. That is what you are designing toward. I started this episode with a spotlight falling from the sky. I want to end it with a bow. Truman wasn't extraordinary. That was the whole point of the show. He was ordinary, and he never got to find out who he actually was until he walked through that door. The open sea was terrifying. He knew that. He went anyway. You are allowed to do that too. Take the bow, not because the work is done, but because the version of you that got you this far, the one who was useful, the one who kept the peace, the one who signed the contracts without reading the terms, that version deserves to be acknowledged before you leave the set. They did what they had to do. They kept you safe. But you're listening to this for a reason, and it isn't because everything is fine. So take the bow and then walk through the door. Next week, the show is going somewhere harder and more necessary than anywhere we've been recently. The series is called Forged in Adversity. The question at the center of it is this: what actually happens to a person when life breaks open? Not the cleaned up, redemptive arc we present at dinner parties. The real thing, the inside of the moment. The first conversation is with someone who has lived every word of that. Kathy Gaiasti was diagnosed with terminal cancer at 37 and given 3 years to live. What she built in the 30 years since is one of the most extraordinary examples of a human being refusing to let crisis be the last word. But what she and I talk about isn't the organization she built. It's the fear, the journal entries, the decision made quietly to stop waiting for someone else to solve the problem. That conversation is next Tuesday, and it's going to change the way you think about whatever hard thing you're currently carrying.
I think the fear of relapse is what survivors struggle with the most, because whenever you have a certain ache or pain or things happen, your automatic instinct is to think the cancer is back. And it does happen. In multiple myeloma, we have survivors that have been out 10 years in remission and it's still relapsed. It does happen. That's why we continue to force progress on new treatments, and oncology has seen unbelievable advancements, thank God.
If today's episode meant something to you, please share it with one person, not for the numbers, but because there's someone in your life who is exhausted by the version of themselves they've been performing. They need to hear they're allowed to take the bow. I'm John Miles, and this is Passion Struck. Thank you for being in the passenger seat for this one. Now, go take your bow. I'll see you on the water.